What's going on, people? My name is Batman, and as you've undoubtedly heard by now, Battlefield Hardline has been delayed, and this is a pretty big deal. That means pre-orders had to have been absurdly low. Because with this decision, they are sacrificing Christmas, and that chunk of COD players that they always try to peel off when they release a week before COD does, as has been their habit in the past. Those are two crucial parts of their sales strategy. And in some ways, specifically from EA's point of view, that means this game has already failed. That means it's already not going to make anywhere near the profit they were hoping to. Maybe there's a chance they don't turn a profit at all, depending on how much it costs to make this game. What's good about this is EA is actually taking a blow to its profits based on their own shallow behavior. I can't remember the last time I saw EA suffer the consequences of their actions, so this is a good thing. And to be clear, I'm not complaining about the delay. You know, everyone was pissed off that Battlefield 4 wasn't delayed, and that they didn't delay that game shows you how much they care about releasing before Call of Duty and Christmas, because they wanted those sales even though they knew they would be in hot water with the community for releasing a broken game. Well, this is what the other side of that looks like, and I'm okay with that. Although I don't think Hardline is being delayed because of bugs. I think Hardline is being delayed because people were simply not interested. So now what I think they're gonna do is basically add in a bunch of extra shit to the game. I don't know if that means new vehicles or what, but it's certainly nothing minor. There's gonna be something substantial and presumably, you know, something big, because minor stuff doesn't require a 3-month delay at the least if they release in January. However, I think most likely this is going to end up to be a 6-month delay until March, which is when tax returns come in, and I believe that's the last month that counts as early 2015. It's like the first fourth of the year. I'm assuming they're going to have to put in extra selling points, like shit they can actually advertise, because this wasn't about bugs. The beta actually ran very well. It's just that the beta wasn't that fun, and they don't deny that either. In the statement they released, they said they were interested in adding a bunch of new stuff to multiplayer and campaign on top of fixing glitches and whatnot. And my big concern is that, well, what if they rush ahead? Because they do have to rush now, right? This game took 2 years to build, and now suddenly they have to think of and then put in brand new ideas at the last minute. All their work schedules are getting fucking scrambled to shit right now. Vacations are getting canceled to replan how they're gonna spend the next 2 months, which was supposed to just be for fixing bugs and other minor game adjustments while the marketing department did its thing, but it's now suddenly serious development time, so they rush the new additions. So what if, my concern is, what if they rush the new additions and then they don't have time to test the new additions, and then the shit's buggy, but they can't delay any longer because Battlefront is coming, so they have to hurry the release, and then Hardline ends up being a buggy release too. That scenario, I imagine, would be the end of the Battlefield franchise. If Hardline came out and it was buggy, I don't see how they could survive that. But assuming they were able to, you know, pull this off, they come out with Hardline, it's a decent game, no bugs, assuming they do pull that off, and I think there's a good chance they will. The question today is, how can Battlefield turn things around? You know, the Battlefield brand, and it's not DICE, it's not Visceral, it's not EA. I mean, it's just the Battlefield brand. The Battlefield PR in general has taken a serious hit. The last video I did about Battlefield Hardline, I could tell it kind of got some people down, as I'm sure the delay has gotten some people down as well. And I wanted to reassure you that there is still some hope left for the franchise. You know, it's down, but it's not out. I don't think Hardline is going to be an especially impressive step forward, but it's definitely not their last step either. I think a point that I forgot to make in the last video that's important to understand is that Battlefield Hardline is suffering from the same exact problem that almost every major game and AAA title has been suffering from for the last couple of years. It's capped on the 360 and PS3. There is absolutely some merit to the argument that Hardline should be Battlefield 4 DLC, but the reason Hardline can't stand up as a meaningful sequel is because there's nothing it can do that hasn't already been done on Battlefield 4. Hardline is coming to the 360 and PS3, which means it still has to essentially nerf itself or restrict itself so that it is able to run on the old gen consoles. I don't know precisely where the console transition stands. It might be half and half as far as sales on which gen consoles go, or it might be 70 to 30 or something, but the fan base that has yet to move on from the old gen consoles is still going to constitute a large enough fraction of their sales so that for the game to be as profitable as they want it to be, they have to sell well in the pre-gen markets. And granted, they can include certain features on the new gen that don't necessarily have to be ported to the old gen, but they can only take that so far before they are basically building 2 separate games for each gen console. And not only would that piss off the old gen players royally, it would also take a shitload of time, and probably more time than they have, considering EA's brutal and incompetent deadline management, the BF4 launch, and the fact that these BF games are getting shit out in a continuous conveyor belt of death now. So with that in mind, I remain skeptical that there's very much they are going to be able to do specifically with Battlefield Hardline, because that pre-gen console handicap remains no matter what. Now, I hope this is the last generation of games that has to be held back by the old consoles, but sooner or later, after enough people have made the upgrade, the devs will move on and have a lot more freedom to make a superior title, and that's when I think we players will actually be given a sequel that is a genuine sequel and not a repackaging of the same shit. Right, because at this point they can only fit so much shit in the box. They need a bigger box, and until they get it, we're not going to be impressed with what's in the motherfucking box. But in the interim, you know, there were some good commentary ideas in the comments on the last video, and I really appreciate that from you guys. A cool commentary idea I got from the comments from you guys, and I tried to go find the comment so I could shout out the person's name, but I couldn't fucking find it again. But the question was, what could Battlefield do to sort of repair its brand, you know, the PR damage? And I know people try to, you know, differentiate between EA and Visceral and DICE, but I think at the end of the day, the community generally, you know, lumps them all together as Battlefield. I mean, most people refer to it as Battlefield, the franchise, right? And the franchise, its public perceptions, it has really taken a hit this last year. You know, they've taken some serious PR damage from the Battlefield 4 launch, and from huge sections of the community, including myself, who perceived Hardline as a bit lackluster, half-assed, and cash grabby. You know, their reputation has done a 180 from a little over a year ago when Battlefield players held the developers in very high esteem. There was a lot of player loyalty, and the community felt loved and respected, and thus loved and respected the guys behind the game in return. But I feel like that mentality has really been shattered at this point, mainly due to just how long the Battlefield 4 problems lasted. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that it wasn't just one-shot kill glitches and other brutal sort of game-breaking bugs. It was also just the netcode in general, which had very serious issues, which were apparent to many players, including myself. And those basically lasted up until they put the game on those high-performance servers, which was like 6 or 7 months after the game's release. And to be fair, it does run very well now. And real quick, I want to bring up the CTE, the community testing environment, because people keep pointing to this as an act of redemption of the Battlefield brand, but I disagree. I don't think having your players beta test your game 8 months after release is something to brag about. But to be fair, I got into the CTE, and there have been quite a few meaningful improvements, and I think we are starting to see those improvements come into the main game, so it's an effective tool, but I would say that it's too little too late. You know, like I said in an earlier vid, that game didn't get fixed until after everyone had rage quit it, so I'm not going to give them brownie points for the CTE. But I do think redemption is possible. I think the Battlefield players who were once loyalists shed that loyalty basically because they have self-respect, but the truth is, deep down, they do want to love Battlefield again. Battlefield just needs to give them an excuse to do it. The delay was a good first start. I think this is going to be the first small step towards repairing relations with the community, because the community feels they've been heard, although really it's their lack of pre-orders that got the signal through, you know what I mean? But another rather simple thing I think they could do that would go a long ways towards redemption is bring back modding. And obviously this is something I've made a video about before, how, you know, and I said, for those of you who haven't seen that video, I basically said how they could do it, as if they just made it so you only had access to the mods if you had bought the season pass, and that way DLC doesn't compete with the mods, because if you buy the season pass, you're already buying all the DLC anyways, right? And the reason they took away modding was so that you would have more incentive to buy the DLC. Don't believe any of the other bullshit. It's about the DLC, it's about money. Because this is what's hurting them the most with Battlefield veterans. Anyone who was around long enough to play mods on Battlefield before they took out mod support doesn't see why Hardline couldn't have been a free player-generated mod. In fact, if they hadn't banned modding, Hardline probably would have come out months ago for free, which is of course why they banned modding. But this game, in conjunction with lack of mod support, is what's pissing off most of the veterans most consistently. Modding support was a huge, meaningful, and enjoyable part of the community back in before Battlefield actually really started getting popular. It had a huge modding community, and it feels like, to veterans, it feels like something people really loved got banned so that they could make a cash grab on the same copy and paste release marketing strategy that Call of Duty has. And I think that, Battlefield veterans see that, and I think that really pisses them off, because modding would be a double-edged sword. Somebody brought up before that, if say Battlefield 4 had a shitload of awesome mods, it might be hard to sell the next version of the game, which in this case is Hardline. But if you'll recall, when I said they should bring back access to modding as a part of the Season Pass so that it wouldn't be competing with the DLC because it's tied to the hip to the DLC, I said they should have the modding only accessible on rented servers. So if you want to install your mod, you have to rent your own server. Well, what they could do is switch those servers over to the new game when the new game came out, if that makes sense. So modding would only be available on the most current Battlefield, and that would obviously piss a lot of people off, but it's better than no modding at all. But even then, what would be concerning is if the modders basically outdid the devs themselves, because that's really, again, how a lot of veterans feel about Hardline in the first place. They see it as a Battlefield 4 mod, and not even a very good one. And really, it kind of is a Battlefield 4 mod. I mean, it's just a rehash of what Battlefield 4 was. What Hardline failed to do, and what every game has failed to do for a couple years now, is bring in a new gaming mechanic, something tangible that players can point to and say, I spent $60 for this new feature. A sequel is supposed to be the original on steroids. That's what makes a good sequel. Serious qualitative and tangible improvements on the original, enough so that the sequel is clearly a different title. Hardline, I feel, came up short in this area. New weapons, new vehicles, new maps, new game modes, but not a new game. And that's really the difference between DLC and mods as opposed to something we would call a sequel. New vehicles, maps, and guns and game modes can all be modded, but a new mechanic, something like Levolution or Commander Mode, those kinds of tangible things are what make a game feel fresh and new. Like, say as you move up the socio-economic ladder, you decide you want to buy a new, nicer house. You wouldn't want someone to come install new windows and doors and a new refrigerator, and maybe like rearrange your furniture for you in your old house. You'd want a genuinely new house with like a fucking patio and a porch swing and a pool and like a new location with a bigger backyard. Mass Effect is the only recent game that I thought had very high quality sequels. If you look at Mass Effect 2 compared to Mass Effect 1, there are some very meaningful improvements, particularly in the side quest area. Like in Mass Effect 1, the side quests and exploring random barren planets for resources were pretty bland. Most side quests had very little plot to them. You got a little email on your ship saying go to this planet and kill these guys, and then you would go to some planet and find some bad guys and kill them, and you didn't have any creative options on how to proceed through the side quests. It was pretty straightforward and linear. Here's something to kill, go kill it. And they all felt the same because, it's basically boiled down to landing on some planet. There was just a barren landscape and then entering a room that had enemies in it. It was pretty repetitive and senseless. But then, with Mass Effect 2, the difference is night and day. They brought in story cutscenes and really developed some of the characters in the side quests. They gave you options on how to complete the side quests, and every side quest was pretty unique. They took out a lot of the stuff people didn't like. For instance, no more driving around to find resources. You could just scan the planet, etc., etc. Whereas Mass Effect 1 side quests felt like meaningless fillers. Mass Effect 2 side quests felt more like the in-depth side quests you get in, say, Fallout or Skyrim. They were each their own unique story. And then Mass Effect 3 brought in the multiplayer wave defense mode, which was a huge hit. It was a meaningful set of sequels. Each was good enough to make its predecessor look genuinely inferior. That should be a dev's goal with a sequel, is to make the original look genuinely inferior. I don't feel that Battlefield Hardline is making Battlefield 4 look genuinely inferior. In fact, based on my experience, I think Battlefield 4 is still the superior game, in terms of gameplay and graphics. Now, I didn't have the same complaint with Battlefield 3 to Battlefield 4, even though those games are very similar, because Battlefield 4 had Levolution and Commander Mode. Now, these seemed like much bigger changes to me before the game came out than they do now, but even if they aren't huge improvements, they're still tangible game mechanics that I can point to and say Battlefield 3 didn't have that. And something I was thinking about, you know, if they marketed this as an expansion pack to Battlefield 4, but just like a $60 expansion pack, similar to how you had Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary as a sort of DLC add-on to Halo Reach, I think it would have gone over a lot better, even if it had the same price. I mean, it's psychological. Words matter. You change the word game to DLC, I think it'd be kind of like changing the price tag $500 to $499, right? DLC would be more humble. I don't know if that makes sense, but if this had been marketed as just a massive expansion pack, I really do think it would have been received by the community more positively. Because people don't usually mind paying, you know, $50 for a season pass and 4 map packs. I'm sure the game is going to have the equivalent of, if not more than 4 expansion packs, but then again, if they build this as an expansion pack, you can't really release more DLC for your DLC, right? That would be kind of silly. So they had to call this a full game so that they could really milk it. Now, my problem with Hardline personally isn't that I disliked it. I thought it was a fun shooter. I just wasn't that impressed with it for the same reasons I mentioned in that last video. I personally feel that it's watered down in the sense that not only is it lacking new stuff, but it also took out a bunch of the old stuff that I really liked, specifically vehicles and most vehicle combat. I don't think the nerfed Little Bird or the armored car with the mounted turret are going to provide very exciting vehicular combat that often. And to be fair, I'm definitely disproportionately a vehicle player in Battlefield, and I'm definitely addicted to those fucking 25mm on the Little Bird. So you know, maybe not everyone's in the same boat as me. So if we go back to the house analogy, for myself personally, and I think many other Battlefield fans, Hardline feels like some decorators came in and installed some new windows and doors, cleaned the carpets, like put a fence around the yard, and then they also took out a bunch of furniture. They figured I would like having a more spacious house, but the truth is, I liked the fucking furniture they took out. And then on top of that, they are charging the equivalent of a brand new house when all they did was make some modest improvements and then take out some of my furniture. Does that make sense? So the easiest way they could neutralize this criticism immediately would be to simply bring modding back. If they came out and made that announcement for Hardline, everyone would suddenly love the shit out of this game, I guarantee it. Also, Dino Mode. I feel like the community has been humbly requesting some sort of meaningful wave defense or third co-op game mode for a long time now, specifically Dino Mode. DICE has put out many Easter egg references to Dino Mode, including that fucking Megalodon. In Dino Mode, or just a third game mode wave defense type thing, would be a big, meaningful, tangible gameplay experience that players could point to and say this is more than just a mod, and it would be easy to port that to the old gen consoles. I mean, the beta takes place in downtown LA. You know what else happened in downtown LA? Jurassic Park Lost World, when that fucking dinosaur escapes the ship and terrorizes the city for a while and eats the shit out of some worthless hippies. So those are two things that I think could be done right now that would repair a lot of PR damage. However, short of that, I think they're going to have to wait until Star Wars Battlefront to really, you know, earn their street cred back. Assuming Hardline doesn't come out with a painfully buggy launch, because that would effectively end the series, I think. People's opinion of Battlefield and EA are going to stay the same up until the next big shooter, which is going to be Star Wars Battlefront. If that game kicks fucking ass, that by itself could repair all the damage that's done. People will not even remember the Battlefield 4 launch. If they can get people to fall in love with the game again, it will restore people's faith immediately, no questions asked. A good game goes a long way, and again, it's not that Hardline is a bad game, but seeing as it's already receiving such ferocious opposition from the community, it obviously doesn't have what it takes to repair the damage, and because it's capped on the old gen at the moment, I don't think it has what it takes to make people fall in love with it either. It's a filler. And even people who are looking forward to it acknowledge that it's kind of a filler side game-esque type thing meant to hold us over until Battlefront. And I'm assuming Battlefront will come out in October or November of next year, so a year after Hardline, and that'll be right on the heels of the Star Wars movie coming out, which I'm assuming will come out next summer. It's slated 2015, and summer is when all the big-ass movies drop, because that's when more people see movies, I guess. And until then, I guess we'll just have to make do with Hardline and hope EA doesn't accidentally deliver a killing blow to the franchise. I'd market it like a 50-50 chance of them doing so. But for now, please remember to rate. This is Batman, signing out.